Hi everybody, Windrake Hex here doing a live set review for Blood from the limited perspective. So this is going to be commons and uncommons for set 6. Really excited about this set. Hopefully it slows down the pace of the draft and sealed format quite a bit. Things got pretty out of control. So anyway, let's jump right into it. Uh, Arachnoglider is a 2/2 double threshold common with flight for the cost of 3. Now this card's excellent in that it's evasive, in that it's also excellent because it's good at multiple times in the game. Um, doesn't really help you when you're behind, but just so you guys know, I do the quadrant theory in a vanilla evaluation of cost and stats. Quadrant theory is just basically how good it is at 4 different parts of the game. The higher it scores in different quadrants, the higher overall score it's going to get. So anyway, Arachnoglider, I want to give it a C plus just because the stats can't push it into the B range, but it's a very strong card. This is often going to push through a lot of damage. Your opponent may not have an answer to it, and you win. This is kind of how flyers work. Double threshold is a little prohibitive. It kind of keeps this card in check at common, but it's a very good card. I would definitely happily play multiples of these in a deck. Bloodbeer is a 1 cost single threshold 1/1. When a tribute control dies, gain 1 health. So this is really good. What I'm going to say is really good, but in set 1 and 2 draft it was kind of give you some bonus as when you were in the sack decks, and then was a sack outlet itself. The health gain's good. It also triggered. There's a lot of some pretty powerful health gain matters cards there. So far in this set, there's a really powerful one, but doesn't really seem to be like a thematic pushed theme. Gaining health as a limited strategy is not the greatest strategy in that it doesn't really change game states. You really want things to be really pushed for health matters to really take off. Even when we had an archetype that was pushed in health matters, it wasn't excellent. It was really good when everything was working, but it needed like 2 or 3 combo pieces, and it was just very frustrating. Anyway, this card by itself is not good, so I give it a D minus. But it's going to go up in value into the D plus range in your decks that want to gain some incidental health and want to sack cards as soon as possible. Blood Eye Defiler is a 5 cost single threshold 3/5 troops. It's a Shinhair Warlock. And Underworld Allegiance deploy. Each opposing champion loses 3 health and you gain 3 health. So this may be a sideboard card at best. Definitely give it a D. It is going. I mean, when you want health, it's going to kind of help hedge you into a longer game. Though that 3 power is really prohibitive at 5, basically at turn 5 for 5 resources. It's not a great deal. It's not. The 6 point life swing doesn't really make up for the stats, in my opinion. Like a 5/5 for 5 isn't even all that great typically, mainly due to issues in synergy and power level of cards. We just need stats, or we need text basically to make cards great. Stats alone, unless it's like a 4/4 for 3, doesn't necessarily sell the card. That's not to say that a 6/6 for 5 wouldn't be excellent, but a 3/5 for 5 is super undercosted, or super overcosted and just not worth it. And so anyway, I give this card a D. Blood's Favor is a basic action 3 cost single threshold uncommon, which says choose one. Each opposing champion discards a card at random. Okay, not great, not quite worth a card. Definitely not 3 resources. Draw 2 cards and lose 2 health. That is worth a card, great. Or void each opposing champion's crypt, gain 1 health for each troop voided this way. So the first and the third clause are hardly ever going to be a factor, or really worth it. You're going to play this if you want to draw cards. It's just fine at doing that. It's pretty much as good as it gets in Blood. Um, Now it does say random. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it doesn't. You get to choose. Okay, so yeah, this card's just fine. 2 cards, 2 health for 3. Basic speed. It's a little prohibitive, but there's not a whole lot of quick speed removal, and we're talking limited, so basic speed is more forgiving for card draw than maybe constructed. So yeah, I like this card. I give it a C plus. I think you're happily going to play it, and if you one of those other choices is better than drawing cards, you're going to be totally stoked to have this card. So in the rare instances where those other clauses are great or choices, this card's going to perform great. So I'm going to give this card I'm gonna give this card a C plus. Boom. Oh. Uh-huh. Okay. Bulky Bisputus is a 6 cost double threshold 5/5. So again, that's overcosted for stats. So it's got to give us something pretty good. When you sacrifice a troop, this deals 1 damage to each opposing champion. So if well, and the problem with Dreadlings is that they die. So I mean, obviously you can imagine a game where you have a board full of tokens, and this just gives your deck just tons of reach, right? Just end the game out of nowhere. This guy comes down, sack everything. That sack doesn't cost anything, which is pretty sweet. Um, Now, oh, this guy doesn't actually get to do the sacrificing, so that hurts. So this is going to be a combo piece. We'll see how supported sack incidental damage type long grindy games are. They basically want to stall the board and win through attrition. Yeah, those strategies are fine. This card's fine in that deck. But that sounds like a very specialized deck, doesn't it? So I'm gonna say that this guy is bad the vast majority of the time, and then he, when he's good, he's gonna be like your finisher most likely. So the stats aren't good. The upside is rare, and he doesn't perform particularly well at different parts of the game. So I got to give this card a D plus, just because synergy is a thing in Hex, and it's hard to really compensate or to factor in when doing vacuum type evaluations like set reviews. Without actually playing the cards. So I don't normally factor in synergy, but I can see this card definitely going up in value as the time goes on in the cycle of this set. Butcher, 2 cost, single threshold, basic action, destroy target exhausted troop. So this is going to be kind of like your staple removal. It's not great. You normally take a big hit of damage. Um, if something has like vigilance or something, this never comes into play. But the fact that it's going to solve your problems more often than not is a good makes it great. Its cost is totally fair for its ability, so I give this card a B minus. It's these commons that really make up the majority of your removal, and yeah, this is fine. This effect's always been good in every environment in every TCG I've ever played, Hex not excluded. But I think it's the first time we've ever had one in Blood like this. So anyway, who knows? Maybe it won't be as good in Blood, but I don't see why it wouldn't. B minus. Callous Carver, double threshold, 4 cost, 1/5, uncommon, necrotic troop, underworld, which has vigilance. This gets attack +4 and life drain until the start of your next turn. So I've debated with people about this card. I think this is often just going to be a 1/5 or 4 in so many games that its upside isn't really great. I mean, if it read 50% of the time, do 5 damage, gain 5 health, and have a 5/5 for 1 turn, I would say this card wouldn't be that great. Because the other half of the time, you just have a 1/5 for 4. Um, Though that would make me like this card more. I don't even think it's 50-50 that this card's going to be able to trigger. When you're on the play and you have support, maybe, but oftentimes this isn't going to even be able to attack profitably. So I don't know. I really have to give this card a D plus. I know it's going to win you the game occasionally, but consistency wise, it's a little bit of a setup. I've already opened 2 of these in my Evo sealed and haven't played one. And anyway, I don't know. I'm really hesitant to try this card. I mean, I'm gonna have to be proven wrong, basically. Cheap Shot is a 1 cost quick action single threshold. Um, Target opposing troop gets -1/-1 this turn, so this is fine. It's basically sideboard. We'll see if we can main deck it. There's not a ton of X1s in this set, but there are in 5 that are worth killing, so maybe you can main deck one of these. And then conscript an ardent troop with cost of 1. The fact that you get a card is super sweet. Now that card's not always going to be relevant, but if you kill something and just have a chump blocker, that's great value for effectively 1 card, 1 card out of your deck, 1 slot out of your deck. And sometimes you're going to hit a home run. I don't think there's a lot of home run 1 drops, but I really like this card. Also, you're just going to really want. Sometimes you're just going to want a random ardent troop to build some more synergy and stuff. So big fan of this card. I'm actually going to give it a B minus. I think it's going to be quite instrumental in providing answers and incremental value over time. I think Blood's kind of gotten a lot grindier. I know, especially with some of the champion nerfs. So anyway, I like this card quite a bit. Crowbones is a 6-cost single threshold troop flight socketable miner deploy. Put socketed card from your crypt into your hand. So a 3/3 flyer for 6 is about the max you ever want to play for a flyer. Like if your opponent just has no answers to flyers, obviously this card's fine just because it flies, but it's a heavy price to pay. The fact that it has miner means it's not even going to be it's not going to utilize the best sockets in some of its pairings. Even if it gets like Swift Strike, it's not really that great on a flyer. If it gets, obviously aren't going to give it when it attacks, it flies. 4/3 with Crush is kind of cool, and Wild and Speed. I don't know. It doesn't really, and then the whole can't be blocked in Blood. It's already evasive, so it's kind of overkill. This card's really going to shine if you have other socketable cards, especially early drops. And this can kind of bring back a card and create value. And this guy probably attacks, and it slows down your opponent's strategy for whatever you bring back. Maybe even keep attacking with 2 troops now or whatever. I like this guy. I can see why he's uncommon. That's a lot of value on a threat. Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna give this card a B minus. I think we're gonna be pleasantly surprised at how strong this card is. Crucible Born is a 5-cost double threshold Avatar of the Mountain. Okay. Alright. I think this is a created card, but let's read it anyway. Flight 3/3. It's fine. 3/3 flight is great. I mean, it's not. It's not 3/3 for 4, but that's definitely a reasonable price to pay. The fact that the double threshold isn't as significant on turn 5. While you have more health than each opposing champion, this has +3/+3. So that's a win more condition, but it's really going to close out a game pretty quick. I mean, just because you're ahead doesn't mean you can stay ahead. And cards like this definitely kind of allow you to keep progressing your game plan of attacking and doing a bunch of damage. I mean, a 6/6 flyer for 5 is pretty insane, and a 3/3 flyer for 5 is not bad. Alright, moving on. I forget what card creates this. I think that little shaded black means it's created, so bummer. But I could be wrong. Um, Death Seeker. Dread Apprentice is a 3-cost single threshold troop. Shinhar Mage. Shinhar Mage is common. So 3/2 for 3 is fine. I think we're going to want more defensive troops in Blood this set. But, it's a fine attacker. Sometimes it's a liability. You just won't play these. But it does have a scrounge clause, and what this scrounge does is it allows you to deploy it and summon 3 dreadlings. I love scrounge effects that increase your scrounge pool in scrounge based strategies. Obviously, it's kind of like a scrounge ramp. And those, are still 1/1s attacking that are going to do some damage. And it's going to, trigger your assault and all that kind of stuff. It's going to give you things to mobilize if you, don't want to take a tempo hit or whatever. So I like this card a lot. I give it a C plus just because in a vacuum it doesn't perform particularly well. I mean, you still have to have something in the graveyard or in the crypt, and this is a 3-drop, so presumably a lot of times it's not going to have that. And then as a late game card, it doesn't really do much, but most 3-drops don't. So, alright, moving on. Furious Smasher, 3/1 for 2, no stats, just single threshold. Yeah, this card's fine. You're going to want it in real aggressive decks. Otherwise, it's too fragile, too hard to maintain. Not a whole lot to say about this card. I think it's going to be good more than it's bad, so I'll give it a C. But oftentimes you're going to want a 2/2 over this for 2. So, anyway. But the upside's there to keep it a solid passing grade. Giant Centipede is a 2-cost single threshold 1/1 troop insect. So sacrifice another troop. This gets +2/+2 this turn. So again, in your sack matters cards or in your incidental dreadling scroungy decks, this is going to be a cheaper version of putting the beats down with the sack. Set 5 had the triple threshold 3/3, but the triggers were permanent. I found a lot of good use for that card. It wasn't widely played. In fact, I don't think it was played against me once. I really enjoyed it, and I've won games with it. It's just the triple threshold is quite prohibitive. Anyway, this is a completely different card. This is going to be more of your beater. sometimes Dreadlings just sit there and just attack into things and die and don't help your strategy. This will definitely help your strategy. So in the decks where this comes out on curve and you have lots of enablers, this is going to be just a nightmare to your opponent all game. Probably end up winning the game. There, it's clearly going to be like a B, B plus. Oftentimes, you're going to be cutting this deck because you don't have the support for it, so you're not even going to play it. So I give this card overall a C plus. Grevengeist, Inkheart Infuser is a one-cost single threshold Shinhair. So again, we're kind of looking at like diversity among the races, and Blood's getting quite a few Shinhair. Just something to think about, because there is the Allegiant diversity tribal support in this set. Basically, different races of the same faction would give pretty powerful bonuses as cards. And anyway, I just noticed a bunch of Shinhair. Just a thought, just an aside. Deploy target card in your hand. Target a card in your hand. Its thresholds become blood. So that's really good. This is going to be, I think, allowing blood to get into playing some really funky cards, like maybe cards they have no business, like double threshold non blood cards, and that's super cool. And the fact that this fixes your resources once uh, helps you. I mean, this is going to be a splash. This is going to enable a lot of powerful splashes in blood. It's basically what I'm trying to say. And the fact that you can do that and get a card doesn't feel like you're totally taking up a slot. This can be sacked later, and whatever. Increase other strategies. I think that's really cool. So I'm actually going to give this card a B minus. I think it's going to be quite influential in blood strategies. Yeah. Milky Eye Venom, 3-cost single threshold, quick action. Target troop you control gets lethal and invincible this turn. So I auto include this in my pool. I really can't see a downside for this. It's basically removal. So long as your board can and your typical exchanges. I mean, lethal, which means it's going to win combat, and invincible, which means it can even push its lethal through Swift Strike and all that kind of stuff. This card's nuts, man. It basically just reads removal. I don't. This is about as good as a combat trick can get. Am I missing something? I mean, it just says I win. I know it doesn't buff stats and stuff, and something has crush, it doesn't help, but I don't know, man. Great card. I give it a B minus. I want to give it a C plus because it maybe I'm just like I haven't had a chance to play with it. It's but it's anyway. I really like this card. I mean, as far as tricks go, um, yeah. I mean, it doesn't have any stat bonuses. So one thing, it can't prevent large amounts of crush damage, and it can't kind of win out of nowhere. Like when you go wide and you play a trick and you do that extra two to push through and you end up winning a race, that kind of stuff. But most of your tricks are just used to deal with problem cards, to deal with your opponent's board advantage. And it's quick action. It's a little cost heavy, but I think that's fair for this powerful of effect. So let's give it a B minus. Mind Rack Sorcerer, Lethal, Diligence, 3-cost, single threshold. Each opposing champion discards a card. So the fact that this is a lethal and a 1/3 for 3 makes a lot of my deck, especially if I'm doing a grindy kind of control strategy. The fact that it gives you card advantage over time is great. I mean, how hard? I mean, your opponent's going to end up trading all sorts of nonsense and try to deal with this card because they don't want to lose a card, right? It's going to apply so much pressure. Its lethal allows it to ensure that its diligence is met, that it gets to untap, basically attack and untap. If you have any way to like exhaust this on your own, that's going to be a super powerful effect. It's just like exhaust. It's just get rid of your opponent's hand while maintaining a very fairly costed troop on its own. I think this card is slightly pushed. I really like it. I'm going to give it a B. Um, Mosh Pit Gladiator. Okay, I want to give it a B minus just because it's not great in the late game when your opponent doesn't have any cards, but it still does deal with most of your opponent's top deck. So I give it a B. I give it a B. Okay. Mosh Pit Gladiator. I have played with this card. When you're in I don't know if you're in Blood, or I'm sorry, in Wild. No, not that either. Ruby or Diamond, with either being a 5/1 flyer or a 5/1 Swift Striker, it's quite strong. Um, if your opponent doesn't have a way of dealing with it, either has to waste the whole removal spell on it, or they have to like sideboard. I mean, granted, it's one. I mean, it's super fragile. Let's just put it. That's the downside of this card, but it's going to be a great beater in a lot of games. My limited sample size that this card is quite good. Um, if you're in a shard type that can support it, native blood not very good. Well, no, even native blood it's great because then it has the gem that allows it to only be blocked by something with 5 or more power. So yeah, really good card. I'm gonna give it a B minus. It's for common, great card. Necropolis Garroter is 2 cost single threshold 2/2 diligence. This gets lethal until the start of your next turn. I don't know. I don't really know how good this card is. I mean, it's fine because it's a 2/2 for 2. That's going to get lethal every once in a while. I mean, your opponent's not going to attack into it. Um, and because lethal doesn't stick, you can't really consider it as a lethal card. It doesn't give it a buff to stats, so it doesn't allow you to keep attacking. I mean, if your opponent just has a 2/2, it's just going to trade and not have to worry about it. I guess some games this is going to be able to attack every turn and maintain lethal, but I don't know. That's not quite good enough for a C plus, but I give it a solid C. A 2/2 for 2 would probably be like a D plus or C minus. So yeah, I have no problem giving this card a C. I feel like it deserves more, but it doesn't feel like a C plus card. So what do you say, like a 77.5 or something like that? All right, moving on. Power and Pain, Socketable Miner, Quick Action, Conscript, a Ardent or Underworld troop with cost 4. The created card gets all the socketed powers of this. So clearly, this is going to depend heavily on your whatever shard you're pairing this with. The native blood shards, it's a little risky for random 4, but if you knew that you can give something flight when it attacks, or you can give it crush and bump up 1 to its attack, or swift strike, like my 3 favorite gems in the minor realm, I think this card's fine. Um, you're basically, so let's just say a 4 cost random card with swift strike, total of 6, but like installment plans, like you don't have to play it all at once, so it means you can use your resources to address problems or progress your board state. I mean, it's not a prohibitive cost. Two, I mean, obviously one would be better, and there is the card of this cycle that cost only 1. I think is really good. So this card is not bad. I think it's above average. I think it's going to give you a legitimate threat more often than not. So for that, I'm going to give it a C plus. Ravenous Spore Maw, 2 double threshold, 5 cost, 5/5. At the start of your turn, this gets -1/-1. Basic, sacrifice another troop. This gets +2/+2. So I think this card's quite good. Some analogs to this in other sets were decent. They did have ways to kind of, uh, well, I was gonna say this. It felt more supported, um, but with Dreadlings, I can't really say that there's not going to be sack outlets in the blood deck, and this is oftentimes either going to be for a little bit, or threat of activation effect on this card is really really high. All you need is like dreadlings or a board state or something. Like this is going to give your opponent a lot of headaches trying to figure out how to block and not lose to this card. So occasionally, your opponent's going to be able to block as such to force you to do really bad things if you want to keep this guy alive, and you're going to have to like think ahead and do a bunch of math and stuff. But I think this is going to be a threat more often than not. It's if you just cast it on 5 and attacked, and then played 1 troop and knew that you could trade, you feel like you get pretty good value out of it. Because it's just going to do a lot of damage. It's going to finish the game. It's going to give you something to do with your outclassed troops. Yeah, I really love it. I give this card a B. B minus just because it does at parity. Well, I mean, it breaks parity, so yeah, I'm gonna give this card a B. I think it's a great card. Moving on. Relentless Zombie, 3 cost, single threshold, 2/2 troop, undead zombie. When a relentless zombie or voracious zombie enters play under your control, if this is in your crypt, put into play. So I'm trying to make this work currently in my sealed pool, and I haven't quite just haven't played one yet. But I think you're gonna want more of the other zombies because this card's kind of bad on its own. I know, but you're gonna want it out first so that you can at least have one in your crypt to gain value out of it. Now, as a free 2/2, sometimes going to be better than worth paying an extra resource during your development phase to have a 2/2. I don't know, maybe. I think this is obviously going to be better in a dedicated deck. You're not going to want to play like just two of these and say you're good. I think the his buddy, the 2-drop that gives him +2/+1 basic action or one shot ability. The voracious zombie is way better by himself, whereas this card kind of needs multiples and masse, so like 5 or 6 or whatever. You know what I mean? You're gonna know if you want a bunch of these. On its own, it's a little prohibitive, a little bit of a setup. I'd rather just have legitimate text or 3/3 for 3, or honestly a 2/3 for 3, and a lot of decks. So for that reason, I'm gonna give it a C-. But he's clearly gonna be, before you get mad, and it's clearly a B- B card in the right deck. Okay, moving on. Sanguine Boon, 1 cost, single threshold, quick action. Target troop you control gets +2/+1, and life drain this turn. I feel like this card's just fine. You know, um, I feel like it's gonna be it's gonna it's just not gonna make sense to play this card because you're just 2-for-1ing yourself and gaining some health. It doesn't quite sound worth it, but I mean, combat tricks, let's face it, either need to give you Swift Strike or they need to bust your health. So honestly, this card goes way down in value. On Swift Strikers, it's great. Blood doesn't really have any Swift Strikers, so I don't know. I want to say this card's just fine because it cost 1. That was my first thought, but all in all, I think this is a pretty underwhelming card. So I'm gonna give it a D. Shadowblade Slicer, 5 cost, double threshold troop, Necrotic Roach, flight, scrounge 3, deploy, target opposing troop gets -3/-3 this turn. So I just love these cards. I just slam these cards. A 3/3 flyer for 5 is just fine. I know there's some pretty beefy flyers out there, especially in Sapphire. Sapphire's got some good common flyers, but and uncommon flyers, but come on, like I feel like Blood gets the second best flyers, and they get a pretty big hit on the frequency of flyers versus like a stereotypical flying set like Sapphire. I definitely like the flyers in set 5. There's a lot of there's good evasive cards in Blood right now in this block, and I think Scrounge 3, you're gonna have to do a little bit of setting this up. Like you don't necessarily need to have a Dreadling deck, but it helps, and you may. I mean, I've done things like just like knowing that I could cast this next turn, just like jump blocked with a card I would never want to jump block with, just because I knew I could kill something next turn. It's like a indirect way of trading up. And yes, but anyway, this is a threat with removal tacked on. This card's excellent. I want to give it a B+. I mean, I like this card way more than where was this? Where was the one I than Ravenous Spore Maw, though they both are very powerful. So I'm gonna change my. I'm gonna give this a B-, and I'm gonna give this a B. I don't know if anybody really cares. It's just mainly for me to organize my thoughts. So I'm gonna give this card a B, and then the other guy a B-. But anyway, this card's excellent. Pick it highly. I would pick. I would first pick it. Yeah. Strangle. Two. Speaking of first picks, Strangle, double threshold, quick action, target troop gets -4/-4 this turn. I mean, it, this is premium removal. Well, not in constructed, but definitely top tier removal in limited. It's going to deal with most things. There's going to be some games where this acts as like a combat trick for you to win combat against something crazy and big. Um, its cost is just super efficient for what it does, and double threshold. I mean, it's rare that you're going to need to play this card on turn 2, even turn 3. It's like your mid range, deal with your opponent's best card, and push value. So anyway, this card's great. B plus. B plus. Murder would be like an A, or would be yeah, I, yeah. I think murder would be an A. And I guess you gotta reserve A's for bombs. So I guess this card would be like a B, but murder would be a B too. But it'd be the difference between 85% and yeah. I give this card a B, but I gave the other removal. See, I'm having a problem with relative strength with removal here because this is the best removal in Blood, if not the whole set. So I give it a B plus. Yeah, leave me alone. B plus. Though it's a very high B plus. Tell underneath, basic action 2 cost, single threshold. Target troop you control gets diligence, summon a zombie. This is cool. I mean, if you have an evasive threat, gain some value, bump up those 2/2s. No big deal. Is it worth a card? Is it worth the setup cost? Is it worth getting 2-for-1 the turn you play it? Not really. But I think it's going to produce enough value, enough games, and it can create a card the turn you play it, so that's helpful. So I'm gonna go ahead and say give this card a C. Tomb Swamp, basic action 1 cost, single threshold. Basic action, put target troop from your crypt into your hand, summon a dreadling. That's great. Yeah, I mean, in a control shell, you play a big giant thing, your opponent has to deal with it, he deals with it, you bring it back, he can't deal with it, you win the game. That's a very common scenario. And the fact that you can do that, and it only costs 1, means that the next turn, most likely, you're going to be able to bring back your big giant bomb, or even your 6/6 for 6. It doesn't really matter at this point, because it only costs 1, and you can play it and play the card that you brought back most of the time, same turn, which is a huge deal with cards like these. Typically, these cards don't make the decks or end up being punish you because they do awesome things, but it's just you don't have the time really to make plays like this. So anyway, this I think you will, and so C plus. It's a great enabler in a control deck. I think you're gonna find something you want to bring back. If it has any enter the play abilities at all, any kind of conscript or anything, you're gonna be super stoked. And yeah, I like this card a lot. Underworld Oppression, 5 cost single threshold. Basic action, opposing troops get -1/-1 for each different Ardent or Underworld race among troops you control this turn. So this card is going to be like an A plus or a D plus. I was really stoked about this card when I first saw it. I have since kind of after looking at the set a little more and just kind of going through some iterations of the average game, which granted could be wrong, but I feel like this card isn't the main issue I have with this card isn't its ceiling. Its ceiling is clearly strong. This could be a one-sided board wipe, right? But for 5 cost, you really want it to, at the very least, be able to deal with one threat reliably, and it can't do that. And in fact, you may not. It may be very difficult for some decks to even have 2 or 3 different races, And yes, in a stalled board state, at parity, this card could push huge advantage. But it's just it's a very like high variance card, right? And not for RNG state, but just because it depends. Its setup cost is so high, and it needs a very specific board state to shine. It's gonna be an A plus. It's just flat out gonna win you the game on the spot, most likely. Some games, sideboard all star for sure. Um, but there's also gonna be those games where your opponent just plays a 5/5. You only have 3 different races. You're just sitting there dying with this card in your hand. It's also going to look amazing because when it's played, it's going to be really good, but it's also going to be sitting in your opponent's hand a lot of the times, not being able to be effective. So, with all that being said, there's going to be a lot of just like disagreement about a card like this. My personal opinion is that it's a C plus. At first glance, best card in the set, right? It was spoiled super early, super hype card, all that sort of stuff, but C plus overall. Vampire Child is a triggered card from a rare, so I'm not going to talk about that. That card right there. Card's amazing. Okay, moving on. Web spinner prelate. Spiders you control have rage 1, 4 cost, single threshold 2, 4. Alright, bump some spiderlings. It's a defensive, it's kind of a defensive card out of the sideboard. Rage is really good. If you can get a spider that doesn't die at the end of the turn, I think it's possibly great. Though Rage you really want to put on evasion or play early. This card can't really do that. I give it a C minus. Wicked Web Spawn, when you scrounge, summon 2 dreadlings. So, this is great. It allows you to keep the scrounge party going. Oftentimes I found in set 5, you didn't want to, unless you were like really, there's this tension between being able to produce scroungers and then slots in your deck to make dreadlings, and then, it's just, there's always this supply line issue between your key scrounge cards and the things that enable scrounge, and then how many slots in your deck could you actually dedicate to just something that just makes dreadlings. And anyway, it was a lot harder to balance than, play this, get a 1-1 a 1-1 token like Valor. I feel like Ardent just had it way easier. So, but anyway, this card's fine because it it doesn't need anything other than just being a 2/2 for 2. These cards are going to wheel, and if you really are a scrounge heavy deck, you're going to gobble these up and be very happy. So I give it a C plus. Withering Gaze, 1 cost, single threshold, basic action. Look at target opposing champion's hand, choose a revealed non-resource, non-troop card, and put it into your deck. Its threshold becomes 1. I don't know. This card's weird. Look at your card opponent's hand is really useful. Choose a revealed non-resource, non-troop card, and then just get it out of there, and then have a chance of playing it. So, turn 1, that's kind of exciting. Later you get in the game, the card just gets worse and worse and worse. I would just rather play troops, tricks, and removal. It's kind of the name of the game in limited, so it probably isn't going to be worth a card slot in my deck. So I gave it a D. Zentos Hunger, 3 cost, single threshold. As additional cost to play this, sacrifice a troop. 1 second, Doug. Alright, so I think we're at. Sorry to bring the dog in. Zentos Hunger is a 3 cost, single threshold quick action. It says, as an additional cost to play this, sacrifice a troop. Gain 4 health and draw 2 cards. It's clearly going to be good in your decks that just make a bunch of dreadlings. It's going to not be worth it probably at any stage in the game. And there are decks that don't. So for that reason, I gotta give it a D minus. But it's gonna approach C playable range in some decks. Yazukan's Fanatic is a 2-cost single threshold troop. Shinhair Cleric, Rage 1. I like it. When you conscript an Underworld troop, this gets invincible this turn. That is really cool. That's definitely an incentive to conscript because invincible and rage. I mean, cards like this typically really peter out really quick. It promises great things like, oh man, I'm just going to keep attacking, and it's going to be like a 7-1, and if my opponent just doesn't play anything, I'll win, right? It just doesn't. You need defense. You basically it's too fragile to do anything with. So the fact that this gets invincible is going to push through some pretty big hits, or gain you a free card if your opponent can't, take the damage. So I think this card's really cool. Clearly, it's not good without conscript enablers. How many enablers do you need? I don't know, 5 to 7. Do you think that's even possible in this format? No, not really. But I'm gonna, dream. I'm gonna give this card a C plus. Well, I'm gonna give this card a C. Normally, this card would be kind of bad, kind of a liability at different stages of the game. But I think it's gonna have upside. It's gonna make it a passable, playable card. All right. If you have if you have like heavy conscript, it's gonna be like C plus, B minus. Okay, that's it. So thanks for watching. I'm gonna do all the different colors, all the different shards, and also hopefully at this point the servers are back on, so I can actually play. If you guys have any comments or questions, please leave them below. They mean a lot. I take every comment seriously. I don't get many, so do take them seriously and try to. It does shape what I do, and I love arguing about stuff about these cards because I think anytime we're just talking about Hex as a community, it's a good thing. So, all right, thanks.